Chandini from Madras Medical College did well. So I think we go to the next section. For the next set of lectures, we have two chairpersons. Dr. Bina Kumari, Madam is the additional professor at Government Medical College, Kottayam. She was the past president and secretary of Kottayam Moji Society and organizing convener of All Kerala Conference in 2020. Madam is also a trainer of IMOCALS and has published many journals in many national and international journals. Welcome to you, Madam.
Thank you.
And next chairperson is Dr. Sunita Samal. Madam is a professor and HOD of SRM Medical College, Chennai, and has a fellowship in minimal access surgery and daycare gynec endoscopy with lots of publications in various national and international journals, and also has bagged the Best Poster and Best Poster Award and Best Paper Award. So welcome to you, Madam, Dr. Sunita Samal. With this, we move on to the next session of 4 lectures. I request all faculty to kindly adhere to the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam, for the kind introduction. At the outset, I'd like to thank the organizer for the opportunity. And without much wasting time, I would like to invite Dr. Avarani Sinha, who is like a professor at Sri Krishna Medical College and who is at present at the ICOJ Governing Council member. And she is also president of like Patna Ops Gaining Society and also Foxy Quiz Committee chairperson. She had a lot of publications. She is having all UG and PG teaching experience and is also joint organizing secretary at AICH 2014 and lot of credits to her. And now I'll invite Madam to like give a talk on like an overview of GTN, gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, like classification, clinical picture, complication, and how to manage. So now over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for your kind words. Can I share the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. So at the outset, I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to participate in this PG symposium. And since evening, we are having very good lectures. And I think I'm having some difficulty in sharing. I'll just do it. Give me a minute. Is my screen visible?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'll make it full screen. So what I have been assigned is to give I have been assigned a long question. That is, can you see the screen?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Proceed, ma'am. So I have been assigned a long question that is on classification of GTN, discussing the presenting symptoms, workup, and complications of GTN, and discuss the management of choriocarcinoma in a 28-year-old having one abortion. So, first of all, what is gestational trophoblastic disease? It is a spectrum of proliferative abnormality of trophoblast, which is associated with pregnancy, and it includes the complete or partial mole, the invasive mole, the choriocarcinoma, the placental site trophoblastic tumor, and the epithelioid trophoblastic tumor. But when we talk of GTN, it is malignant invasive mole, choriocarcinoma, placental site trophoblastic tumor, and epithelioid trophoblastic tumors. They all are the malignant forms, and they can arise after any type of pregnancy, and collectively they are known as gestational trophoblastic neoplasia. These days, the GTD spectrum has been expanded, and it also includes the atypical placental site nodule, as 10 to 15% may coexist or develop into PSTT or ETT. Now, coming to the FIGO classification, if we look at the staging of GTN, the stage 1 are the gestational trophoblastic tumors that are strictly confined to the uterine corpus. In stage 2, it extends to the adnexa or to the vagina, but is limited to the genital structures. And in stage 3, they are extending to the lungs with or without genital tract involvement. And in stage 4, we include all the other metastatic sites. Now, coming to the clinical features of choriocarcinoma, the most important symptom is persistent or irregular vaginal bleeding, which can occur after labor, abortion, or evacuation of a vesical mole. This bleeding can occur either within days or months, but rarely after 2 years. There may be associated vaginal discharge, which may be blood-stained or offensive if there is ulceration or infection. Sometimes because of continuous HCG production, there may be amenorrhea. Due to an enlarged ovarian cyst, the patient may present with pelvic pain or pressure. Rarely we may get clinical features due to metastasis like dyspnea, cough, chest pain, and hemoptysis due to lung metastasis, irregular vaginal bleeding due to vaginal metastasis, and with brain metastasis, the patient may present with headache, hemiplegia, dizziness, seizures, and visual disturbance. With liver metastasis, there may be epigastric pain and jaundice. Sometimes this tumor may have a rapid growth, widespread dissemination, and there may be high propensity to hemorrhage, and the patient may present in the medical emergency. If we look at the signs, the uterus may be enlarged or boggy. There may be vaginal metastasis, which can appear as bluish red vascular tumor, which bleeds easily on touch. Theca lutein cysts are sometimes palpable. And if there is a metastasis in the lower genital tract, it may present as purple or blue back papules or nodules, which are extremely vascular and might bleed profusely. As already said by the previous speaker, they should never be biopsied because at that time it can lead to torrential hemorrhage. Abdominal tenderness may be present if liver or gastrointestinal metastases have occurred. Sometimes there may be abdominal guarding and rebound tenderness if there has been hemoperitoneum due to perforation, and sometimes the patient may come with hemorrhagic shock if there is excessive vaginal bleeding. For diagnosis, in all cases of molar pregnancy, a serum quantitative HCG should be done in the follow-up. And in any women of childbearing age who presents with abnormal bleeding or has unexplained metastatic disease, we should always do a serum quantitative HCG. We all know that choriocarcinoma, it produces abundant amounts of HCG, which may range from 100 to 1 lakh MIU per ml, depending on the extent of the disease. And we suspect metastatic brain lesion if when the ratio of beta HCG in spinal fluid to serum is 1:60, but usually we are not doing this serum HCG, beta HCG in the spinal fluid. Now, what is the FIGO criteria for diagnosis of postmolar GTN? When the plateau of HCG lasts for 4 consecutive measurements over a period of 3 weeks or longer, that is days 1, 7, 14, and 21, or when there is a rise in HCG for 3 consecutive weekly measurements over at least a period of 2 weeks or more on days 1, 7, and 14. And of course, if we have a histological diagnosis of choriocarcinoma, our diagnosis is certain. Now, regarding the investigations, apart from serum beta HCG, once the diagnosis is made, we have to know the extent of the disease. And for that, we have to do the renal and hepatic functions, the peripheral blood counts, and the baseline serum HCG levels, and imaging studies. Imaging studies are very important. And whatever be the imaging modality, the choriocarcinoma, it always appears as a mass which is enlarging the uterus. Sometimes it may manifest as a discrete central infiltrative mass, and sometimes we may see heterogeneous appearance. And this heterogeneous appearance correlates with necrosis and hemorrhage. In ultrasound, we can see the tumor, we can see the cystic ovaries, and it will also help us to exclude the retained product of conceptus. Now, other tools for investigations in GTN are chest X-ray to diagnose lung metastasis, and for scoring, we can count these number of lung metastases. Sometimes we may even do a lung CT. The liver metastasis may be diagnosed by ultrasound or CT, and brain metastasis may be diagnosed by MRI or CT. There are a few pictures. This is the plain X-ray chest showing the typical cannonball secondaries or snowstorm appearance. This is the MRI of brain. liver metastasis. Now, this has already been done. Now, management. Any women with GTN, she may be treated either with a single agent or a multiple agent chemotherapy. Now, how do we decide the treatment? The treatment is based on the FIGO 2000 scoring system for GTN following assessment at the treatment center. We all know that PSTT and ETT may be treated with surgery because they are less sensitive to chemotherapy. So what we are talking now, since I have to talk about the management of choriocarcinoma, I will be excluding PSTT and ETT. So this is the FIGO prognostic scoring for GTN, in which we take into account the age, the antecedent pregnancy, which is very important, the pregnancy to treatment interval, the pre-treatment serum HCG levels, the largest tumor size, which is taken in centimeter, the site of metastasis. More scores are given to liver and brain metastasis, less to the lung metastasis, and number of metastasis, and previous failed chemotherapy. Again, that is a very important point. Now, the use of WHO prognostic scoring system is more predictive of clinical outcome than the use of individual risk factors. If there is a score of 0 to 6, it suggests low risk of resistance to a single agent chemotherapy. And if we have a score of 7 or more, that predicts high risk of resistance to monotherapy. And these patients, they require combination chemotherapy. So if a patient comes with low risk GTN, it should be treated with a single agent, which can be either methotrexate or an actinomycin D protocol. However, sometimes there may be no good response with the first agent, so we may have to change it to the alternative single agent, the other agent. Also, we may have to change the agent if the HC level plateaus above the normal during treatment, or if there is toxicity which precludes an adequate dose or frequency of treatment. Sometimes there is an inadequate response to the initial single agent, multiple agent chemotherapy. And therefore, in these cases, we have to treat them as a high risk disease, especially if there is a significant elevation in the HCG level, if there is development of metastasis, or if there is a resistance to a sequential single step chemotherapy. These are the different regimes. I think because of the paucity of time, I will not be just telling them, but you can find them in the books. These are the regimes. Usually we give methotrexate always, since it is a folic acid antagonist. So it is always alternated with folinic acid, and it is preferred to be given by the intramuscular route. And if the patient has a WHO score of 5 to 6 or has a clinical or pathological diagnosis of choriocarcinoma, in these patients, if we treat them with a single agent chemotherapy, there is an increased risk of resistance. So therefore, we have to lower the threshold for these patients. And if we have given multiple agent chemotherapy,
my right hand is blocked.
That these patients, they respond better. Now coming to the high risk GTN. For high risk GTN, they should be treated by multiple agent chemotherapy. And the most commonly used regime is EMACO regime, which is etoposide, methotrexate, actinomycin D, cyclophosphamide, and vincristine. And the survival rates with GTN is very good. I think it is one of the greatest success story in gynecological oncology, where we get very good results. And the overall survival rates for patients with high risk GTN is as high as 95%. A number of adverse features that predict poor outcome include the liver or brain metastasis. This is the EMACO regime, and I think you can go through it from the books. And now there is another terminology, that is ultra high risk GTN. So among the high risk group, as defined by the FIGO staging and classification, there is a subgroup which has a score of 13 or greater, and as well as patients with liver, brain, or extensive metastasis. And these patients, they respond poorly when they are treated with the first line multiple agent chemotherapy. So in these patients, we may go with the salvage therapy, that is in patients with liver metastasis, with or without brain metastasis, or those patients who have a very high score, they can be given etoposide and platinum, EMA, or another more intensive chemotherapy regimen rather than EMACO. And these patients then have a better response and outcome. And these patients also need a longer consolidation with 4 cycles of chemotherapy. The other salvage therapy could be EP-EMA, TPTE, MBE, that is methotrexate, bleomycin, etoposide, VIP or ICE, BEP, bleomycin, etoposide, cisplatinum, FA, FAEV, and high-dose chemotherapy with autologous bone marrow or stem cell transplant has also been researched, and they can be also treated with immunotherapy with pembrolizumab. Role of surgery. Now, sometimes surgery has a role in management of GTN, and in this patient, we are not going with hysterectomy as she is only 25-year-old, but in patients who have completed the family, hysterectomy can be done in uncontrolled uterine bleeding, and in these patients, we can go with uterine artery embolization. Sometimes there may be bleeding from organs such as liver, GI tract, kidneys, and spleen, and again, these patients, they may need a laparotomy. Neurosurgery is needed sometimes if there is bleeding in brain or if there is an increased intracranial pressure. Resection of an isolated drug-resistant tumor may also be curative at times. Coming to the role of radiotherapy, radiotherapy has limited role in GTN except in treatment of brain metastasis. Some centers give whole brain radiotherapy, that is 3000 centigrade in 2000 centigrade daily fraction, concurrent with chemotherapy, or use stereotactic or gamma knife radiation to treat existing residual brain metastasis after chemotherapy. Follow-up. Follow-up is very important. In any case of GTN, during treatment in GTN, serum HCG levels should be monitored weekly to determine response until 3 consecutive normal levels. In low risk, they are given monthly for 12 months, then every 6 months for 1 year, and annually until 5 years. In GTN high risk, monthly for 18 months, every 6 months for 2 years, and annually until 5 years. No follow-up, according to the recent guidelines, no follow-up imaging tests are required. Coming to the contraception, after chemotherapy in GTN, it is recommended to avoid pregnancy for 12 months in low-risk patients and for 18 months in high-risk patients. Intrauterine devices are not recommended because of the potential of uterine perforation. If we look at the long-term effects, the outlook for women treated for GTN is generally excellent, with an overall cure rate close to 100%. Further pregnancies are achieved in approximately 80% of the women following treatment for GTN with either methotrexate alone or multi-agent chemotherapy. However, there is an increased risk of premature menopause for women treated with combination agent chemotherapy. Therefore, women, especially those approaching the age of 40 years, should be warned of the potential negative impact on fertility, particularly when they are treated with high dose of chemotherapy. I think with this, I would like to end my talk, and I would like to thank the organizing committee, the FOXI Oncology Committee, all the organizing committee of POGS for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, madam, for your nice approach for this structured essay questions. And I think all that, because GTN develops almost 10 to 15% following a molar pregnancy. So any patient had a molar pregnancy, that patient should be followed up, like even following after that, any normal delivery or any abortion, they should be followed up. Because we had a case that patient, she had a first molar pregnancy, then she had a 2 full-term normal vaginal delivery. After 5 years after that, she had continuous bleeding PV, and it was treated like a heavy menstrual bleeding, one small fibroid. So diagnosed as fibroid, finally she was landed up in a choriocarcinoma. Even first was a molar pregnancy, following that she had 2 vaginal delivery. So all molar pregnancy should be followed up definitely, and after first delivery, the placenta should be sent for the histopathology. That should be done. Thank you so much, madam. Now over to my co-chairperson to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you. And our next speaker, Professor P.K. Shekharan. Shekharan sir does not require any introduction to all our students and teachers. He's a past National Vice President of FOXI and Senior Consultant in PVS Hospital, Kozhikode. He's a former Professor and HOD of Department of Gynecology, GMC Kozhikode, and he's a veteran in the field of GTN. He'll be talking upon scoring system in GTN. Over to you, sir.
Respected colleagues and my dear students, we are only about 1.5 hours late. I think those students who are feeling hungry or tired can have something to drink. You can ask your mother or somebody there to get something for you. Anyway, my talk has been fully covered by my previous speaker, my friend, Dr. Abbarani Sinha. So I don't have much to say, but I'll still say something about it. Anyway, thank you for the invitation. Now, Roy, Hertz, and Lee in 1956 reported the cure of metastatic choriocarcinoma in 3 patients, and it was from the National Institute of Cancer using methotrexate. And seeing this success, Arthur T. Hertig, a pathologist in the Harvard University, has described this momentous achievement as God's first cancer and man's first cure. Actually, this was the beginning of the medical oncology on the field of malignancy, especially solid tumors like choriocarcinoma. In 1976, Baksha from Charing Cross Hospital in UK reported a series of cases of 317 GTN treated with from 1958 to 1973. And he has identified that many patients will may not respond to the standard treatment of methotrexate and other things at that time. He has identified the reason for this failure, and then he put it as the prognostic scoring system, which was known as the Vaxo scoring system. Later on, the system was accepted by WHO to become the WHO scoring system. The main points that Dr. Baksha has identified was the age of the woman, the antecedent pregnancy, that is the previous pregnancy following the which the GTN has developed, like abortion, mole, or term pregnancy, the duration from the antecedent pregnancy.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, your slides are not moving.
I could move it.
But it is, we are seeing only the first, the
First slide.
introduction slide, first slide.
Okay, let me see once and go back to that.
Sir, click on that, start the slideshow.
Start slideshow.
PDF, it is PDF. So just click on the start slideshow in the top. That print to PDF, next to that there is a slideshow, just above your cursor.
There?
On the video or where?
See, on this, you can see, sir, there is a start slideshow.
That I was doing that only. Anyway, I will go back.
Or you just click on this arrow, sir. In the bottom, 1 of 2, like that one arrow is there. No, sir. Atom tare, slide 1 of 2.
Slide 1 of 2 എഴുതിയിട്ടില്ലേ?
No.
1 of 12 എന്ന് എഴുതിയിട്ടില്ലേ, sir? Atom tare.
You are screen sharing live. It is also on. Video remote.
Sir, is it in slideshow? Can you make it small? Then you may be able to see.
Okay, okay. Let me try.
Sir, full screen ആക്കിയെങ്കിൽ അതൊന്ന് please make it small.
Full screen ആണ് ഇപ്പോ.
Then please make it small. Then you will be. Now it is moving.
ഇപ്പൊ കാണുന്നുണ്ട് sir.
Start slideshow. Okay, yes, sir.
Is it okay?
Please click on that. No, it hasn't moved yet.
Now?
No, sir.
കാണുന്നില്ല, നേരത്തെ കാണുന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നു.
കണ്ടു പിന്നെ പോയി.
അത്
റൈറ്റിലേക്കുള്ള ആരോ പ്രസ് ചെയ്താലും കാണും മറ്റേ കീബോർഡില്.
Start slideshow അല്ലേ? Start slideshow and clicking. Now.
താഴത്തെ ആരോ പ്രസ് ചെയ്യണം.
അവിടെ കാണുന്നല്ലേ, ഫോർവേഡ് കാണുന്നല്ലേ?
ഫോർവേഡ് കാണുന്ന പ്രസ് ചെയ്താണ് സാറേ.
Moving on my screen, it is moving.
സാർ ഒന്ന് സ്ക്രീൻ ഷെയർ സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് റീസ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്താൽ മതി സാർ. റീഷെയർ ചെയ്താൽ മതി.
സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്യാം. ന്യൂ ഷെയർ
അല്ല സാർ, ഇത് സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ഷെയർ ചെയ്തിട്ട് രണ്ടാമത് ചെയ്യാം.
ഓക്കെ. Now, start slideshow.
Yes, sir.
ഇത് full ആക്കിയിട്ട് വേണോ?
അല്ല സാറ് താഴെ സ്ലൈഡ് എഴുതിയിട്ടില്ല അവിടെ കൊടുത്താൽ
Okay. See. Okay, now it is okay.
Yes.
So to take the show. Is it okay now? Again gone now?
Next slide വരുന്നില്ല സാറേ. കീമോതെറപ്പിയുടെ slide ആണ് ഇപ്പോൾ ഉള്ളത്. You are telling the history, no?
Oh, okay.
Sir, it is enough if you keep changing in the bottom. That is enough, sir.
അതായിരിക്കും നല്ലത്.
Enough. You can read it.
Okay, without slideshow. Okay. Okay, sorry, the technical side after having presented so many times again. Okay, so it was thought that so many factors are associated with the prognosis of a GTN, and it was Vaksho who has put these factors as the scoring system. He developed the scoring system. And later on, it was accepted by the WHO and became the WHO scoring system. Then in 2000, FIGO thought of adding this scoring system for the proper stratification of the cases for chemotherapy. There was a modification on the WHO scoring, which was they have avoided the ABO blood group of the mother and baby, which was there in the Vaksho staging group or scoring group. And also there was low risk, intermediate risk, and high risk. And the FIGO scoring system has made it either low risk or high risk. And the liver was given the maximum score of 4, which was only 2 in the earlier system. And the stage and the scoring system was taken for deciding the chemotherapy. That was the changes that we have made. Now, the criteria, as we all know, again repetition, because you go by the diagnosis, staging, and then scoring to decide on the chemotherapy. Now, usually after evacuation of the mole, the SCG will fall by a log, which means if it was 10,000, the next week it should become 1,000 and then 110 like that. It goes by 1/10. And instead of that, even if there is a plateauing, which is a fall less than 10% of the previous value, is known as the plateauing of the value. And if there is 3 weeks time, 4 values like that, it is known as the plateauing, which is diagnostic of GTN without any other thing. So here is a cancer where we make a diagnosis cancer only on its marker. And the other criteria is rise in values over 3 values over 2 weeks. The rise in value means an increase in the SCG value of more than 10% compared to the previous value. And if there is a persistence of the HCG 6 months after evacuation is also taken as a criteria. But in the latest thinking now, if the SCG is falling even after 6 months, we need not start the criteria of starting chemotherapy, but that may be very difficult in our situation. So we used to treat such cases which is positive even after 6 months. And if there is any evidence, histological evidence of choriocarcinoma, that is GTN. So 50% of the GTN is following molar pregnancy, but other 50% can be following term pregnancy, abortion, or ectopic. And these are the situations where we are going to miss the cases. So any abnormal presentation like irregular bleeding for more than, say, 2 months has to be checked with the urine pregnancy test. Any patient coming with the hemoptysis or cough with the chest X-ray showing something has to be seen with a CG measurement. Anybody in the reproductive age comes with a seizure for the first time should have a check of the beta HCG so that you will not miss a term delivery following which then a choriocarcinoma developing. So these are the special situations where you may have to think of GTN as a cause of the abnormal presentation. Staging, as already said, stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. Stage 3 is extension to the lungs with or without. 4 means all other metastases. This was discussed by the previous speaker already. Now, when you diagnose a GTN by the criteria what we said, the patient should have a metastatic workup for classifying further on. A chest X-ray is appropriate for diagnosing lung metastasis. So anybody who has made a diagnosis of GTN by our SCG follow-up should have an X-ray chest taken. And if the X-ray shows any shadow on the leg, that patient should have an MRI brain. If the X-ray test is negative for any such thing, she need not have further imaging technique for thinking of brain metastasis. You can straight away start the classification. Ultrasound of the abdomen and the liver has to be done in any case where you are making a diagnosis of GTN. And if necessary, even by MRI or CT scan. Having made such a thing, then you classify as per the scoring system. So the scoring system are the age, antecedent pregnancy, whether it is mole, months from the index pregnancy, that is the disease diagnosed from how many months from the previous termination of the pregnancy, whether it's small, abortion, or term pregnancy, the amount of SCG present at the time of diagnosis, the largest tumor size, including that is present in the uterus, the site of metastasis, the number of metastases, and previous failed chemotherapy. As we said, the liver and the brain gets the maximum score of 4. And if there is a failed chemotherapy, especially by 2 or more drugs, it also carries a high risk. So this is how the scoring and the staging is done. The treatment depends upon the stage and the score of the disease. Now, FIGO staging system it will be for predicting the patients who respond poorly to single agent chemotherapy. So you have to pick the patient from the very beginning that this patient is not going to respond to single agent chemotherapy. It will also help to select the appropriate treatment protocols for the GTN. It maximizes the chances for cure while minimizing the toxicity. You will not give multi-agent chemotherapy if it is not required for that particular patient. So the choice of chemotherapy is stage 1, 2, 3 with a score of 6 and below is single agent chemotherapy. The single agent chemotherapy that we are very satisfied with is the methotrexate folinic acid regime, though the actinomycin may give a better cure rate compared to methotrexate, but the toxicity is more. So we still go with the methotrexate and folinic acid. Stage 1 or 2 or 3 with a score of 7 and above, and the stage 4, irrespective of the scoring,
28 to 30 week, not like
requires combination chemotherapy. Okay. Now, the risk score of 5 and 6 may not respond well to a single agent chemotherapy. Now, that is the problem that has been seen. So we are thinking whether we have to go back to that intermediate staging or risk scoring system again, as it was done by Berkshire. So this was the thing, but it was seen that these patients will respond, at least 70% will respond to single agent chemotherapy, either methotrexate or actinomycin D, and rest will have cure with multi-agent chemotherapy. So you can achieve 100% cure for this group also. If you see there is a less response to single agent, switch over to multi-agent so that all the 100% of that group is not exposed to the highly toxic multi-agent chemotherapy. At least 70% could be treated with a single agent therapy, even this group. But if there is a diagnosis of choriocarcinoma and the score is 5 and 6, there is a thinking that we should start multi-agent chemotherapy. So that is the stage that will help. As the ultra high risk said, as already mentioned, is a patient with a score of more than 13. If you start the multi-agent therapy for this patient, she usually dies within no time. This is because the complete lysis of the tumor, bleeding into the tumor, acidosis, development of septicemia, and to avoid that, we start with a lower dose of 2 drugs to given 2 or 3 courses and then start on the multi-agent therapy. The salvage rate is better. So this is how the scoring system and staging system will help us to decide on the chemotherapy, the choice of chemotherapy, and In the lowest case, we can achieve almost 100% cure rate with the preservation of fertility. And even in the high risk patients, we can achieve almost 90% cure with the preservation of fertility, at least 70 to 80% of the things. So this is one of the very highly malignant and associated mortality before the chemotherapeutic era, where the only treatment was hysterectomy with a maximum salvage rate of 40 or 50%. Now it is cured for almost 100%. The cornerstone for this achievement is the HCG follow-up after evacuation. Now, somebody who had an abortion or a termination of pregnancy should have a urine pregnancy test after 4 weeks of termination, so that some cases of the early abortion without any proper evidence of molar change, even on histopathology, may be the early development of a molar pregnancy which will be missed. So that risk may be avoided if you do a simple pregnancy test after 4 weeks of evacuation. I think that's all. I need not go on talking because there are so many, 2 more talks are there. So thank you very much once again, the organizing team. And thank you, Kunjamaydin. If at all there is any question, I'm ready to answer that possibly.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Shekaran, sir. That was well explained to the postgraduates. Next, I would request Dr. Sumita to introduce the next speaker.
Yeah, I'd like to invite now Dr. Jayalakshmi Duraraj, who is a professor at JIPMER in Department of Obs-Gynae. Her area of interest is gynec-oncology. She's a gold medalist in her MBBS in Obs-Gynae, and she has a lot of publications in national and international journals. She's a friend of mine too. So over to now Dr. Jayalakshmi. She's going to talk on PSTT, how it is different. Dr. Jayalakshmi?
Yeah. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Very good evening to all of you. I know it's a fag end of the day, so let me make it very short. So,
Jayalakshmi, people would like to see you. Can you put your video?
Your video is not coming.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
ma'am. I'm just sharing my slides. So the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'll be just taking you through a topic, which is usually a very rare one, an enigma, a diagnostic challenge. So here we have PSTT and insight. So whenever we are asked about PSTT, it is usually a neglected topic. So the overview of the topic would run as below. So we need to emphasize on the classification, the diagnosis schema, the description of PSTT as to how different it is from the other GTN, the management protocol, the special circumstances under which we are going to encounter and treat these women, the follow-up, of course, and to conclude. So to run through the classification of GTD, as already the previous speakers have enlightened, it's a benign complete mole, partial mole, invasive mole, choriocarcinoma, and here we have our PSTT and ETT, which is a rare entity, which are a rare entity. Whichever I've highlighted in the black and red are a GTN composition. So if you see here the diagram, so this is PSTT, that is whenever there is an increased proliferation of extravillous intermediate trophoblast, then occurs the PSTT. So if you see here, syncytial trophoblast, and here you have the cytotrophoblast. So apart from this, you have something called as extravillous intermediate trophoblast. So whenever there is a proliferation and tumor development in this, you call it as a PSTT. ETT has been combined with PSTT because the clinical behavior remains the same, but there is a difference in the IHC. So now we move on to the description. So as I've already told you, it's a rare phenomena. So it can occur after any type of pregnancy and at any time. The frequency, because of its rarity, remains unclear, but it accounts for 0.2% of the total GTD according to a UK consensus. The diagnosis, of course, is difficult because we can't embark on HCG, which is the usual GTN evaluation tool that we get, and its presentation. So more so, we have to depend upon its presentation and the rest of the metastatic workup. So always the presentation might be in the form of an irregular uterine bleeding, especially in the post-pregnant phase. That means most of the women referred to us as PSTT might be in the second or third decade. There might be unexplained metastatic lesions, which could be rare, and also it could be a late presentation. And of course, very rare, you have something which is called as hyperprolactinemia nephrotic syndrome, which could come as the late in your answer sheets. So here, to further go through the morphology, it is an average 5 centimeters involving the endomyometrium. It ranges between tan to yellow nodular mass, and it has an intensive myometrial invasion of almost 50%. And as I've already emphasized, it's nothing but an extravillous interstitial implantation site trophoblast tumor. The histology is an intermediate type trophoblast, which can run as sheets and nest with a local infiltration. And to remind you again, it is a moderate pleomorphism, low mitotic activity, and absence of chorionic villi because it's an extravillous component. So what about the expression or IHC which is involved with PSTT? So here it is. So we have a diffuse HPL, that is something apart from HCG. Okay, so it's a human placental lactogen. Then apart from that, you have the other extravillous components such as MUC4, HLA-G, and CD146. Focal expression of HCG and inhibin occurs. And if you look at the proliferation index, it's moderately raised only. And if you see the Ki67, it is almost only 10 to 30%. So whenever you find a Ki67 more than 50%, think of choriocarcinoma. So this is a picture of an HPL staining, which is a diffuse, as I have already told you. This is an inhibin, which is a focal, and this is HCG, which could be minimal, or it could be just focal once again. So how different is PSTT from the other components of GTN? So let's quickly go through. Here, the uterine lesion is less hemorrhagic and necrotic. And as compared to the others, you have a lower HCG level in comparison to the large tumor bulk, which we might get in a PSTT. So this is a discrete biological behavior of PSTT. And of course, as I've already informed you, expression of HPL and extravillous trophoblastic markers are on the rise, with only beta HCG, free beta HCG being slightly increased than the total HCG levels. It is marked by slow growth, late metastasis, and lymph node metastasis, which is one more point to be remembered, especially when you deal with PSTT. FIGO storing system. So as Sir had already told, is it valid in PSTT? No, of course, we don't have any validity of this FIGO storing system for PSTT. But of course, the staging is for FIGO, whatever we told for GTN, holds good for PSTT as well. And whenever there is a relapse, whenever there's a relapse of GTN, always consider PSTT on the mind, because PSTT is a less chemosensitive or resistant to chemosensitive drugs. So the need for surgery arises. So most of the time when we give chemosensitive drugs and there is a relapse, think of PSTT. So this is what I mentioned as lower chemosensitivity or increased resistance to chemotherapeutical agents. So we need to embark on hysterectomy as a final resort. So moving on to the evaluation and staging. Whenever post-pregnancy, a patient presents with irregular uterine bleeding, suspect a GTN. Could be in the form of a PSTT, ETT, or a choriocarcinoma. So this group requires an extensive investigation. So metastatic imaging, and in the metastatic imaging, are you able to hear me?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
you are audible. Please proceed.
Yeah. So first and most important, a proper history and physical examination is a mandate. Second, it is followed by a pelvic ultrasound with Doppler. As I have already told, this is a high risk GTN, not a low risk GTN, as we have already seen in the previous few slides. So pelvic ultrasound with Doppler, which we show a mass with increased vascularity, and we can go for a contrast CT of pelvis, abdomen, and thorax to look for the other sites of metastasis. And if you have any contraindication to CT, you need to focus upon the MRI. And if MRI, if at all a screening for brain is required, or if there is suggestive of a pulmonary metastasis, go for MRI, which is a better modality than a CT brain. When you think of a relapse following a treatment, go for a PET CT, because it will help you identify the site of recurrence which needs to be resected. But PET CT has its own problems, such as in terms of false negative and false positivity. So the next few slides I'm just going to run through. This is just a few imaging slides showing here the tumor and increased vascularity. Then this is a MRI which shows a myometrial invasion. And of course, this is a chest X-ray, and this is the CT brain showing a solitary nodule. So this sir has already told. So FIGO staging system for GTN holds good for revising the management. Now we move on to what is called as the prognostic factors. As I've already told you, because PSTT is something very rare phenomena, we do not have much data on this. So there have been only population-based case series based on which NCCN and FO guidelines have marked certain prognostic factors. So the NCCN guidelines has brought about these prognostic factors based on a case series of 60 patients. And here it is the high mitotic index, deep myometrial invasion, extensive coagulative necrosis, LVSI, and of course, when the duration from antecedent pregnancy is more than 2 years. So then we call it as a poor prognostic or highly grievous prognostic factors. So the ESMO came around again with other factors based on their case series, and they said that this could be the other prognostic factors such as the stage of the disease, HCG, mitosis, etc. But finally, on a multivariate analysis, they identified that it was only the duration from the antecedent pregnancy more than 4 years, which was considered as a prognostic factor. So what about the treatment? So whenever there is PSTT in the stage 1, which is non-metastatic, surgical treatment is the go. So go for a hysterectomy with or without pelvic lymph node sampling. And if you think there is a high index or a high prognostic factors, which might be there in the terms of whatever I explained to you, then you need to go for systemic metastatic pathway. That means you need to go for a metastatic pathway treatment in the form of chemotherapy. Suppose these risk factors are absent, such as mitotic figures are very low, there is no necrosis, pregnancy outcome is very less, then you have to go for a monitoring and surveillance. So now we have to check that why is this lymph node biopsy being done in cases of women who have a hysterectomy being performed. So as we have already emphasized, these women, that is pelvic lymph node metastasis incidence is as high as 5 to 15%, especially in a case of stage 1 tumor. Okay, because there is a deep involvement of the myometrium in these cases. So we need to perform pelvic lymph node dissection in PSTT along with hysterectomy, even in stage 1, unlike in other cases where the treatment is basically chemotherapeutical agents. So now moving on to metastatic disease. So here metastatic disease, whenever you have a metastatic disease, it's not complete without hysterectomy. And of course, we need to go for rest excision of the metastatic disease if feasible. And again, we need to concentrate on the chemotherapy, which is going to be highlighted in the next talk. So I will not go into the detail. So it is basically platinum and etoposide based. So it could be EMA-EP or EP-EMA, or the other option could be a BEP. So use of a granulocyte colony stimulating factor would be useful along with chemotherapy, because these EMA-EP drugs are highly toxic and is used especially in GTN when there is going to be a salvage chemotherapy. That means after failure or after a relapse of GTN. And after this, of course, we need to embark on HCG monitoring and surveillance. So what are the special circumstances? So whenever you need to avoid an uncontrolled hemorrhage, metabolic acidosis, as Sir had already told, in cases of ultra high risk GTN, especially in brain and lungs, go for something called as a low dose induction chemotherapy in the form of etoposide and cisplatin weekly up to first to 3 weeks. Then you go on to the multi-agent chemotherapy. Is there a role for fertility sparing surgery, especially when these young women have just had an abortion or have just had one delivery? So the answer is yes, and answer is also no. So whenever if you see a localized lesion, you can go for a uterine curettage, go for an hysteroscopic resection followed by chemotherapy. But of course, only when the lesion is localized and with enough counseling regarding the chances of a metastasis being informed to the patient and at their own risk. Suppose if the disease is diffuse, then there is no other option than to go for hysterectomy. So what about the surveillance monitoring? So this is to detect recurrence and progression. So here we have HCG assay and imaging. Of course, the HCG does not go hold. Hello. Are you people able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah. So we have the HCG assay, which takes a backseat because its sensitivity is not very good in PSTT. So we have to embark or base our metastasis on imaging. So whenever there is going to be a non-metastatic, then go for systemic therapy. And if there's going to be a diffuse metastasis, go for a systemic therapy or palliative care. So this is about the monitoring of these women. So how do you, once you have finished the treatment, completing the chemotherapy, how do you follow these women? So the guideline says that because these women have a high risk, they pose a high risk GTN or a ultra high risk, a PET or a CT. PET CT is a mandate at the completion of chemotherapy. Of course, if you're not able to have that, at least a CT would be obvious choice. And after 6 months to 1 year, you need to again repeat it. So the next 2 to 3 years, the patient needs to be under monitoring or surveillance. So what about the clinical outcome? How does the clinical behavior of this change or range between, differ from the other GTN? So if you take the PSTT, 15% have a chemotherapeutical failure and 15% have a death, with 30% almost having a recurrence. And if you see the survival, if there is no metastasis, almost very good survival of 100%, provided we have done a hysterectomy with pelvic node sampling, and 50 to 60% if there is going to be a metastatic disease. So to conclude my talk, so once again, PSTT is one of the rare phenomena or a rare type of GTN with slow metastasis, late presentation. And whenever there is going to be a relapse of GTN, think of PSTT if we have missed it, and especially if you're having a low beta HCG and a larger volume of disease. So that means we require an active surveillance of these. And as unlike the other GTN, surgical management is a mandate as there is an increased insulin, as there is an increased resistance to chemotherapy. So that brings me close to my topic. So thank you one and all for a very patient hearing. And this is from the Facebook of PSTT group, which carries this logo as HOPE. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jayalakshmi, for a good insight on PSTT. And as it is a rare form of GTN, so we should be very vigilant while managing, like it can be the possibility. So we should keep in mind regarding this PSTT. And I heard a case, in fact, like that patient was only in the early 30s. She has developed, like she has come following 5 years of last delivery. And it was diagnosed as PSTT and she was landed up in hysterectomy, and patient is doing well now. Thank you. Now I take over to my co-chairperson for introducing the next speaker.
Now we have Dr. Prashant Ganeshan, additional professor of medical oncology, JIPMER, Puducherry. He is a bone marrow transplant fellow from the cellular Cellular Therapy Unit at UTMA MTACC, and faculty in Medical Oncology Cancer Institute from 2010 to 18. Over to you, sir, for your talk on chemotherapy in GTN.
Thank you very much, everybody from this South Indian group for giving me this opportunity to talk on the chemotherapy aspects of GTN. So over the next 5 to 10 minutes, I will take you through various aspects of chemotherapy in GTN. So I think many of the previous speakers have covered some of the aspects of these. So I'm going to do a very quick job because it's also very late in the day. So I was told that I have to cover this topic mainly from the perspective of a short note, which many of the postgraduates would be expected to write. So here we go. So it is very simple for you to understand. When we talk about chemotherapy in gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, I'll just give you an overview. There is single agent and then there is combination. In single agent, you have methotrexate single agent, actinomycin D single agent, and then you have others. 80 to 90% of the time when you use single agent, we are going to use methotrexate. Actinomycin D is used only when methotrexate fails. It is very rare to use actinomycin D as first line. The others, basically 5-FU and etoposide, is rarely, if ever, used in India as a single agent. 5-FU is preferred in China. Etoposide can sometimes be used as a single agent. So when you talk about single agent chemotherapy in GTN, it's practically methotrexate, 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 and sometimes actinomycin D. The second part is the combination, which you use for high-risk disease or cases who fail the first line sometimes. So the most common one, which is used universally, is the IMACO regimen, which is used for high-risk patients. And then rarely for IMACO failures or very high-risk patients, you can use something called IMA-IP. You must be aware of something called a prephase, which is a term which we use in medical oncology for some of these chemotherapies, which we use in very high-risk disease like lymphoma. Sometimes we use a small dose of chemotherapy just to get them out of this very heavy disease load. So you can use this low-dose EP regimen. I'll talk about that in some time. That's for ultra high-risk patients with a lot of risk. There are other regimens which you just have to know the names. These are mostly used in salvage setting. There is Taxol platinum, Taxol etoposide, and some of these regimens which are usually used for germ cell tumors like BEP, TIP, and ICE. And I think the previous speaker also mentioned in very, very difficult to treat cases, people have tried high-dose therapy with autologous transplantation. But these are all mainly done in one-off cases, and it's okay if you don't have to remember the details. The treatment approach, just to give you an overview, I'm not going to go into all these staging and risk grouping, which you already done. Basically, 0 to 6 scores, it's a low risk of resistance to a single agent chemotherapy, so go with a single agent chemotherapy. If you have a score of more than 7, you generally do not do single agent chemotherapy because the failure rates are going to be 70 to 80%. So you always go with a combination whenever you see a score of more than 7. If you have a score of more than 12, this is what is called as the ultra high risk disease. And these are patients usually have multiple sites of metastasis. Usually they will have either liver or brain or both. And they may have already failed multi-agent chemotherapy in the past. They generally have a survival of only about 60 to 70%. And these patients probably need to be started with something more than IMACO. So even though there are no randomized trials for this, many centers prefer to use something like IMA-EP in this condition. So again, to reiterate, FIGO 1 and 2, practically all of them will be low risk. I'm talking about the FIGO 1 and 2 stage, and more than 90% are going to respond to single agent. When we come to FIGO 3 and 4, the prognostic scoring is very, very important. If you have a score of less than 5 or 6, definitely go with single agent. Almost all the stage 4s will end up being high risk. Some of the stage 4s, which are actually 5 and 6 score, better to treat with IMACO rather than with single agent because the resistance rates are very high. Now, what is this methotrexate single agent? It is given once in 2 weeks. The standard schedule, which is recommended, is to give 1 milligram per kg. So for a 50 to 60 kg person, it'll be about 50 milligrams or 60 milligrams. This will be the average adult size and the average adult dose. Some protocols just give a flat 50 milligrams, which is also fine. So 1 milligram per kg, day 1, day 3, day 5, day 7 on alternate days. And on the even days, 2, 4, 6, 8, we give leucovorin to rescue the methotrexate toxicity of the normal cells. We give about 30 hours after you given the methotrexate, it's 15 milligrams flat dose of leucovorin. These schedules are repeated. So you give this schedule for the first week till day 8, wait for a week. From the day 15, you start the second cycle. You keep repeating this cycle. You keep checking the beta HCG till the beta HCG is normal. And once you get a normal beta HCG values, then you give 3 more. So general rule in GTN nowadays is you give 3 after normalization. So till you get to normalization, then you give 3 more cycles. Then you're done. So this is how you give the methotrexate single agent schedule. There is also a weekly schedule of methotrexate, which is popular in some countries like the United States, which is 50 milligrams per meter square of methotrexate, which is given weekly until the HCG is normal. However, this schedule, I must say, is not preferred. It's not ideal because the response rates are generally lower than the earlier schedule that I showed you. But what is important here is it is more convenient for the patient. If you have to give this day 1, day 3, day 5, day 7 plus day 2, 4, 6, 8 leucovorin, the patient will probably need to be admitted in the hospital or has to be available very close to the hospital. So somebody who's not able to do all those things can only come once a week or something like that. The weekly schedule is preferred in that case. So you could use the weekly in a selected situation, but generally it's preferable to use the first schedule that I talked about. Generally, you get remission rates as high as 85 to 90% in stage 1 and almost 3/4, let's say 60 to 70% in stage 2, 3 will respond to the methotrexate single agent. There will be a few patients who will not do well with this, who will relapse. What are the risk factors for relapse? This is very well known. If you have a choriocarcinoma element, if you have metastasis, or if your pre-treatment HCG is more than 50,000. If any of these are there, you must be on the watch. These are the patients who are likely to fail. But doesn't matter. If you start out with a low-risk disease or stage 1 and 2 disease, almost 2/3 can be salvaged with further single-agent actinomycin D, and about 1/3 can be salvaged with Imaco, which means that almost 100% of your patients will ultimately be salvaged and cured. The cure rate will be more than 95% or almost close to 100% when you're talking about stage 1 and 2 low-risk disease. Let's say 3/4 of them will be cured with the first-line single agent. Another 25% will require further therapy with more single agent therapy or with Imaco. Whatever it is, you will end up curing most of them. What about actinomycin D? This is also acceptable as a first line, just like methotrexate. The response rates are quite similar, but it's more toxic and it's more difficult to deliver. So generally, most people prefer methotrexate. The regimen is also once in 2 weeks. It's a 0.5 milligrams IV bolus, which is given on day 1 to day 5. So generally, we prefer actinomycin for second-line therapy after the methotrexate fails. You must be aware, because many of you will be using single-agent methotrexate, you must be aware of what toxicities to expect. Mostly the toxicities of the schedule that I mentioned, day 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 5, 7 with leucovorin rescue is mild. Most of them have some GI side effects. Almost 80% will have, but it's mostly mild. It's just some minimal oral mucositis, some soreness in the mouth, some mild nausea, abdominal pain, and some of them might have fatigue, fever, infections. Severe neutropenia is very rare when you give the leucovorin rescue as mentioned. And some of them can have some conjunctivitis, eye irritation. So it's mostly well tolerated. Most patients can be easily delivered in a gynae unit without any problem. The actinomycin D, on the other hand, is definitely having more issues. You get nausea, you get alopecia. So that's something of a concern in a young woman. And you can also, in rare situations, have very bad hepatotoxicity with actinomycin. You get a condition called veno-occlusive disease, which can be sometimes fatal. And of course, you definitely get more neutropenia with actinomycin. And be very, very careful when you deliver actinomycin because it's a very bad vesicant. And if it comes out of the vein when you push that drug in, it can cause a very bad ulceration and very bad destruction of the tissues around. So generally, more difficult agent to deliver. So that's why we prefer methotrexate in most cases. This is just for completion's sake of the theory part. What are the other single agents? Etoposide can be used and 5-FU can be used, which also seem to have good response rates. But generally, these are not preferred, at least in India. So just to summarize, just to reiterate for all the postgraduates, low-risk disease, FIGO stage 1, FIGO stage 2, 3 with a risk score of less than 7. Treatment is single agent chemotherapy. Single agent methotrexate 1357 with leucovorin rescue is the preferred regimen. You can use actinomycin D as salvage agent. It's generally not very much used as a first line agent for the reasons we discussed. What are the exception? There are some patients with 5-6 disease and stage 3 or 4. There can be having a very high failure rate. So in a selected situations, you may want to use Imaco rather than use a single agent in these patients. This has to be discussed on a case-on-case basis. There are some trials ongoing in this particular subgroup, but we do not have the results yet. Overall, stage 1 and stage 2 or low risk GTN has an excellent prognosis. If you're not curing it with the first line, you can cure it with the second line. So most patients are alive and cured with this amount of low risk disease. Now we'll move on to the high risk GTN. High risk GTN is all stage 4 and all patients with high scores. Even a stage 2 or 3 with a score of 6 or more, a rare situation, can be considered high risk. We discussed about that. And patients with PSTT or ETT with a diagnosis more than 48 months with the last pregnancy, these are also high risk because they are likely to fail single agent. Why are we again stressing on this high risk? Because you do not use single agent. Single agent will fail in high risk disease. So you use a combination upfront. So what's the preferred combination is Imaco. So Imaco means EMA is given on day 1 and CO. So the vincristine is called O because the original brand name of vincristine is Oncovin. So that's why we call vincristine as O. So vincristine and cyclophosphamide, that's the CO, is given on day 8. So you have drugs which are given on day 1, day 2, and the methotrexate is given over 12 hours, and you have a leucovorin rescue. So this comes in the first part, and the next week is vincristine and cyclophosphamide. And please remember, it's a 2-weekly cycle. So as soon as you complete day 1, day 8, on the day 15, that becomes the day 1 of the next cycle. So every week you end up giving chemotherapy, IMA, CO, IMA, CO, IMA, CO, like that. That's how the whole schedule goes. So there's no actual break of therapy at any point of time when you're delivering something like Imaco. The complete response rates in this population is quite high. Almost 3/4 of them will get a CR, and the long-term survival rates are quite good. But again, remember, in very high-risk disease, this is not randomized controlled trials, but generally people have observed that very high-risk disease, that is FIGO score of more than 12, or when patients have got liver or brain mets or both of them, the failure rates of Imaco can be very high, 70 to 80%. So there are some small studies which have used IMA-EP in these patients and have shown good results. And that's the reason why you talk about IMA-EP as the first-line therapy in patients with this so-called very high-risk disease. Again, the same principles apply. How long do you give the Imaco? You give till HCG is normal, and then 3 more. What is the other important point? Because you get more toxicities with Imaco, you may probably have to give some GCSF, that's growth factors, after you give your day 8, that's from day 9 to day 14, and you can maintain the counts. And as much as possible, because this is a very highly proliferative neoplasm, you stick to the schedule and try to deliver the chemotherapy on time. What are the toxicities of Imaco? You can get grade 3 or 4 hematological toxicities in 40 to 50%. And as I said, you need to use GCSF. And in very extensive pulmonary metastasis, be careful with pulmonary hemorrhage. I'll talk about that when we talk about the preface in the next few slides. Some patients can have deep vein thrombosis. Mucositis is quite common because you're using a significant dose of methotrexate here. Hepatic toxicity because of the actinomycin D, and late complication because there's a lot of alkylators here. In the long run, a very small percentage of patients can develop secondary cancer. So definitely it's not something to be taken lightly. There can be issues with Imaco. So with due respect, we have to deliver. We always say that we deliver chemotherapy with a lot of respect because these are very toxic drugs. So definitely Imaco is not something to be taken lightly. You deliver it with a lot of respect to get your optimum results. What are the prognosis in high-risk GTN? Stage 2, 3, overall cure rate we already mentioned is 95 to 100%. I think we already discussed that, so I'll skip this. What are these poor prognosis? Liver mets, brain mets. If both are present, only 10% long-term survival. And similarly, very high-risk disease, more than 12, the cure rates are quite low. So here we talked about the IMA-EP. What is this IMA-EP? So there are 2 ways of delivering this. Some people give it as an EP-IMA, some people giving it as a IMA-EP. Again, there are no trials which are comparing this versus that. It's just individual center preference. We generally prefer what is called as a IMA-EP, which is etoposide on day 1 and day 2, which is similar to the Imaco. The methotrexate is similar to the Imaco. The dacnomycin on day 1 and 2 is similar to the Imaco. What is different here is instead of the CO, which comes on day 8, you give etoposide again on day 8, along with cisplatin of 75 meters square. And again, because this is quite toxic, you will definitely need filgrastim, that is GCSF, from day 9 to day 14 of each treatment cycle. As for Imaco, this is also repeated every week. So it's IMA EP, IMA week 1, EP week 2, IMA week 3, EP week 4, and so on and so forth till you get a normal beta HCG. What are the other situations? If you have brain metastasis, you need to use a higher dose of methotrexate in either Imaco or IMA-EP. The suggested dose is 1 gram per meter square, which is bordering on what we call as a high dose methotrexate or intermediate dose methotrexate schedules. So you have to be much more watchful with your leucovorin rescues. Some people we even do monitoring of methotrexate levels when you're using such higher dose, and some of them may require whole brain radiation subsequently. If you have extensive metastatic disease, particularly in the lungs, if you have like 20, 30 lung nodules, as some of these choriocarcinomas will present like that, they have very high risk of hemorrhage when you use Imaco straight away. So here we use this so-called prephase, which is a very low dose of etoposide and a very low dose of platinum. You give that every week till the things are settled before you start the Imaco. Very important to remember, this has clearly been shown in multiple studies to reduce the initial mortality from as high as 10% to something like 0.6, 0.5 to 0.7%. So it severely cuts down the initial mortality in a very high-risk disease. So please remember, this is a low-dose schedule which must be used whenever you face a high-risk disease. So I'll just summarize what we discussed now. So you have a diagnosis of GTN. First thing, you have to see the scoring system. If you have stage 1 and 2 and low score, use the methotrexate 1357, which is popularly called the Charing Cross regimen because originally developed in the Charing Cross Hospital in London. If they have responded, you keep them on follow. If they fail or they develop toxicity, and if their score is still below 7, you can still try single agent, and that is actinomycin D is the preferred agent for this patient. If the score goes over 7, or they primarily start off with a high-risk disease or a stage 4 disease, here the first line treatment should be Imaco. And for a very high-risk disease that's more than 12, or if they fail the Imaco, you consider IMA-EP. So this is in a nutshell what we do with chemotherapy in GTN. I think that's all from my side. Any questions or queries or any comments? Most welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Prashant. That was well covered and it was extensive. Actually, it is apt for a postgraduate student to imbibe the true sense of chemotherapy. I think we'll wind up the session and to summarize, GTN is actually an exclusive or unique malignancy, I should say, when it has been having a good cure rate compared to other malignancies, and it has got an excellent tumor marker called serum beta HCG. So the follow-up of beta HCG is very important. So one thing we have to highlight is, and one critical factor is that the patient compliance is very important. So once these patients are diagnosed as GTN or complete mold, the follow-up of the patient and the patient education regarding the seriousness of turning it into malignant and the chance of cure when with the timely intervention that has to be explained, and the education of the patient and relative for the follow-up is very, very important to achieve this cure rate. I congratulate all the speakers for the excellent presentations, and over to you, Dr. Sunita, for the final remarks.
Yeah, it was a very good presentation. It has covered like GTN. It is, as Madam told, like it is the most like curable cancer as compared to the other cancers. And all the speakers have very good insight into all the topics. I think all the postgraduates might have been definitely very good. Like they might have got a lot of information from this. And I thank all the organizers for this opportunity and congratulate all the speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kunju Mohiuddin, Dr. Mumtaz, and all the POX team for giving me this opportunity. It was very nice to be with all these speakers, especially Shekharan sir, Jayalakshmi, Prashant, and Abha madam, and also Dr. Sunita. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Bina ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bina, and thank you, Dr. Sunita.